These films were never supposed to fail. They had stars, they had vision, they had the full weight of Hollywood behind them. And yet something went wrong. Audiences stayed away. Studios panicked. Careers shifted. But here is the twist no one saw coming. The Academy rewarded them anyway. Awards were handed out. History was rewritten. These are the rare films that lost the box office battle but somehow won the Oscar war. Number 12. Reds, 1981. There was a moment when Hollywood believed ambition alone could guarantee success. Then came Reds, a sprawling political epic driven by ideology, romance, and revolution. It carried the weight of history on its shoulders and the expectations of a studio desperate for prestige. Directed by and starring Warren Beatty, the film aimed to capture the life of journalist John Reed with emotional intensity and intellectual depth. Critics respected it, the Academy embraced it, but audiences hesitated. Despite winning 3 Academy Awards including Best Director, Reds struggled to justify its enormous production cost. Its runtime demanded patience, its subject demanded attention, and its tone demanded reflection rather than excitement. In an era shifting towards spectacle and escapism, this kind of cinema felt like a challenge rather than an invitation. Viewers admired it from a distance rather than embracing it in theaters. Yet that is precisely what makes Reds so fascinating. It is not a failure of craft. It is a failure of timing, a film caught between artistic ambition and audience appetite. The Academy rewarded its seriousness, its performances, and its bold vision. But the box office told a colder story. People were not ready to sit through a dense political narrative when simpler entertainment was readily available. Over time, Reds has gained respect as a courageous piece of filmmaking, but its financial disappointment remains a reminder that even Oscar-winning brilliance cannot guarantee audience connection. Sometimes the gap between critical acclaim and public interest is simply too wide to bridge, and when that happens, even a film as powerful as Reds becomes a quiet warning to the industry. Prestige does not always sell tickets. Number 11. The Cotton Club, 1984. Behind the glamour of jazz and the illusion of roaring 20s excess lies one of the most chaotic productions in Hollywood history. The Cotton Club promised spectacle. It promised music. It promised a vivid recreation of a legendary nightclub where crime and entertainment collided under neon lights. But what audiences received was something far more complicated, a film weighed down by behind-the-scenes turmoil and a budget that spiraled out of control. Directed by Francis Ford Coppola, a name already synonymous with cinematic greatness, the film carried enormous expectations. Yet from the beginning, production issues haunted it. Financial disputes, creative conflicts, last-minute changes, all of it bled into the final product. And when the film finally reached theaters, it failed to connect with audiences in the way the studio had hoped. Despite winning an Academy Award for Art Direction, recognizing its visual brilliance, the Cotton Club could not escape its reputation as a box office disaster. The lavish sets and meticulous design stood in stark contrast to its weak financial performance. It looked like a masterpiece, but it earned like a misfire. What makes this story compelling is not just the failure itself, but the scale of the ambition behind it. This was not a small film that stumbled quietly. This was a major production that collapsed under its own weight. The industry watched closely because the stakes were so high. When a project this big fails, the consequences ripple far beyond a single movie. Today, the Cotton Club is remembered as a cautionary tale, a reminder that artistic vision alone cannot save a production plagued by instability. The Academy recognized its beauty, but audiences never fully embraced it, and in that disconnect lies the true tragedy of the film. It had everything except the one thing it needed most: a connection with viewers. Number 10. Popeye, 1980. There is a very specific kind of failure that only happens when expectations are sky high. Popeye was not supposed to struggle, it was supposed to explode. A beloved comic icon brought to life by Robin Williams in his first major starring role. Directed by the unpredictable visionary Robert Altman, built on massive sets that turned Malta into a surreal cartoon village, everything about this production screamed event cinema, and yet when audiences finally saw it, the reaction was confusion more than celebration. The problem was not effort, it was interpretation. Instead of delivering a bright, accessible family film, Popeye leaned into a muted, almost offbeat tone. Characters mumbled instead of projecting. The humor felt strangely subdued. The world looked authentic but emotionally distant. Viewers expected energy. What they received was something closer to a quiet experiment disguised as a blockbuster. Word of mouth cooled quickly. The film earned money, but far below what the studio had projected. For a project this expensive and this visible, anything short of a smash was treated as disappointment, and that is exactly what it became. Yet the Academy saw value where audiences hesitated. The film won the Oscar for Best Original Song Score, recognizing the craftsmanship behind its music and structure. That award stands in sharp contrast to its box office narrative, because Popeye was never lazy. It was bold in a way that mainstream audiences were not ready to accept. So it asked viewers to step into a strange, stylized rhythm rather than delivering familiar comfort. Over time, the film has gained a peculiar respect, not because it succeeded, but because it dared to be different. But in its own era, that difference cost it dearly. The lesson is simple and brutal. When a film promises spectacle, audiences expect clarity. And when that promise is broken, even an Oscar cannot repair the damage. Popeye did not collapse completely, but it missed the moment it was built for, and that is sometimes the most painful kind of failure. Number 9. One from the Heart, 1981. Some films don't just fail, they collapse under the weight of their own imagination. One from the Heart is one of those films. This wasn't meant to be ordinary, it was designed as a reinvention, a musical romance built entirely inside a studio, where reality could be controlled, shaped, and perfected. Neon lights instead of sunlight, artificial streets instead of real ones. Every detail constructed to feel more real than reality itself, but that control came at a cost. Directed by Francis Ford Coppola, coming off the monumental success of Apocalypse Now, expectations were enormous. This was supposed to be the next evolution of cinema. Instead, it became one of the most infamous financial disasters of its time. The budget spiraled, the production became obsessive. And when the film finally reached audiences, the reaction was distant, not hostile, just disconnected, because something felt off. The visuals were stunning, stylized, almost dreamlike, but the emotion didn't land the way it needed to. The characters felt trapped inside the set the same way the production was trapped inside its own ambition. Audiences didn't feel immersed, they felt aware, and that awareness broke the illusion the film depended on. At the box office, the numbers told a brutal story: massive investment, minimal return. The failure was so severe it nearly destroyed Coppola's studio, American Zoetrope. This wasn't just a disappointment, it was a warning about what happens when vision outpaces connection. And yet, the Academy saw something else. The film earned nominations for Best Cinematography and Best Art Direction, recognizing the technical brilliance behind its creation. Because visually, it was undeniable, bold, experimental, ahead of its time in ways audiences weren't ready to accept. Today, One from the Heart is often revisited as a misunderstood experiment, a film that tried to push cinema forward, but lost its audience in the process. It didn't fail because it lacked beauty. It failed because that beauty never fully translated into emotion. And when a film feels constructed instead of lived, audiences don't step inside, they stay outside and watch it fall. Number 8. Yentl, 1983. Some films arrive with applause already waiting. Others arrive with expectations so specific that anything different feels like a mistake. Yentl belonged to the second category. Directed by and starring Barbra Streisand, this was more than a film. It was a personal statement, a passion project shaped by years of persistence and creative control. The story was intimate, the themes were thoughtful, the ambition was undeniable. But when it finally reached theaters, the audience response was more restrained than the industry had predicted. The challenge was tone. Yentl is not a conventional musical. It does not build toward explosive numbers or broad emotional release. Instead, it leans inward. The songs feel reflective rather than performative. The narrative unfolds quietly, asking the audience to engage with identity and restriction rather than spectacle. For viewers expecting a traditional musical experience, this approach felt unfamiliar, and unfamiliar often translates into hesitation at the box office. Financially, the film performed modestly. It was not a collapse, but it was not the breakthrough success many had expected given Streisand's star power and the film's visibility. In industry terms, it became a soft performer, a film respected but not embraced at the level required to justify its scale and anticipation. That distinction matters. Because disappointment is often defined not by failure alone, but by the gap between expectation and outcome. The Academy, however, responded differently. Yentl won the Oscar for Best Original Score, recognizing the musical craftsmanship that audiences had struggled to fully connect with. That award highlights the central contradiction of the film. It was artistically precise, yet commercially distant. It offered depth where audiences expected immediacy. Over time, Yentl has been reevaluated as a bold and personal work. But at the moment of release, it stood as a reminder that control does not guarantee connection. Even when a filmmaker shapes every detail, the audience ultimately decides how that vision is received. And in this case, the response was respectful but reserved. A quiet film that never became a loud success. Number 7. New York, New York, 1977. There are films that feel like celebrations, and then there are films that feel like obsessions. New York, New York sits firmly in the second category. Directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Robert De Niro, alongside Liza Minnelli, It was designed as a grand tribute to classic Hollywood musicals. But instead of nostalgia, audiences encountered something far more complicated. A film that blended romance, tension, and performance into a tone that felt deliberately unstable. The production itself was marked by excess. Long shoots, expanding budgets, creative experimentation that pushed beyond traditional structure. Scorsese was not interested in recreating the past, he was dissecting it. And that approach created a film that felt emotionally raw, rather than comfortably entertaining. The chemistry between the leads was intense, sometimes volatile. The musical sequences were elaborate, but they often served the character's instability rather than offering simple joy. When the film was released, audiences struggled to find their footing. It was not the uplifting musical they expected. It was not the straightforward drama they could easily follow. It existed in a space between genres, and that ambiguity affected its commercial performance. The box office returns failed to meet expectations, especially given the talent involved. For a project of this scale and visibility, that shortfall defined it as a disappointment. Yet one element endured beyond the film itself. The title song became iconic. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Song, separating its legacy from the film's financial outcome. That single piece of music outlived the initial reception and became a cultural staple. It is a rare case where one part of a film achieves the success the entire project could not. New York remains a fascinating contradiction. A film that aimed for grandeur but delivered complexity. A production that reached for the past but revealed something more uncomfortable about ambition and ego, and in doing so, it lost the audience it needed in the moment. The Academy recognized a fragment of its brilliance, but the box office reflected a harsher truth. Not every vision translates into connection, and when it does not, even great talent cannot change the outcome. Number 6. Cabaret, 1972. There are moments in cinema when a film succeeds artistically, but unsettles audiences in ways that affect its commercial trajectory. Cabaret is one of those moments. Directed by Bob Fosse and led by a magnetic performance from Liza Minnelli, the film was not designed to comfort. It was designed to disturb quietly, to seduce before revealing something darker underneath. And that approach created a tension that audiences in the early 1970s were not entirely prepared to embrace. Unlike traditional musicals, Cabaret does not escape into fantasy. It traps its audience in a world that feels increasingly unstable. The performances are vibrant, even playful at times, but there is an underlying sense of dread that never fully disappears. As the story unfolds, that dread becomes impossible to ignore. The film shifts from entertainment into something more reflective and more unsettling. That shift is precisely what critics admired. It is also what made mainstream audiences hesitate. Commercially, Cabaret performed well enough to avoid total collapse, but it did not dominate in the way a musical of this scale might have been expected to. It challenged viewers rather than rewarding them with familiar structure, and when a film asks too much of its audience, the response can become divided. Respect does not always translate into ticket sales. Admiration does not always create momentum. The Academy, however, responded with overwhelming enthusiasm. The film won 8 Academy Awards, including Best Actress for Minnelli. That level of recognition confirms the film's artistic impact. It was bold, it was different, and it pushed the boundaries of what a musical could be, but those same qualities contributed to its complicated relationship with audiences at the time. Looking back, Cabaret stands as a turning point, a film that redefined a genre while exposing the limits of audience expectation. It proved that innovation carries risk, that even when a film succeeds creatively, it may still struggle commercially if it refuses to meet viewers halfway. The Academy honored its courage, but the box office told a quieter story, one of hesitation, one of uncertainty, and one of a film that was perhaps too ahead of its time for its own good. Number 5. Barry Lyndon, 1975. Perfection can be a problem. That is the paradox at the center of Barry Lyndon. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, this film was crafted with a level of precision that bordered on obsession. Every frame was composed like a painting. Every movement felt deliberate. The lighting alone became legendary, with scenes illuminated by natural sources to achieve a visual authenticity rarely seen in cinema. It was not just a film, it was an experience designed to be studied as much as it was meant to be watched, and that was precisely the issue. Audiences did not reject Barry Lyndon because it lacked quality, they struggled with it because it demanded patience. The pacing was slow, the tone was detached, the narrative unfolded with a calm inevitability rather than dramatic urgency. For viewers expecting emotional engagement or narrative excitement, the film felt distant. Beautiful but distant, and distance is dangerous at the box office. Financially, the film underperformed relative to expectations. It was not a disaster, but it failed to generate the kind of widespread appeal that a director of Kubrick's stature might have anticipated. The gap between artistic ambition and audience accessibility became clear. This was a film that critics admired and audiences respected, but neither group turned it into a major commercial success. The Academy recognized its brilliance, awarding it 4 Oscars including cinematography and art direction. Those awards validate what is immediately apparent to anyone who watches the film closely. Barry Lyndon is visually extraordinary. It achieves a level of aesthetic control that few films have ever matched. But visual mastery alone does not guarantee emotional connection. Over time, the film has been reevaluated as a masterpiece. Its influence has grown. Its reputation has strengthened, but its initial reception remains a critical part of its story. It reminds us that cinema is not just about what is created, it is about how it is received. And when a film prioritizes perfection over accessibility, the audience response can become restrained. Barry Lyndon did not fail because it lacked greatness. It faltered because its greatness required effort, and not every audience is willing to meet a film on those terms. Number 4. All That Jazz, 1979. There are films that entertain, and then there are films that expose. All That Jazz does not ask for your attention. It demands your discomfort. Directed by Bob Fosse and inspired by his own life, this is not a traditional musical. It is a confession disguised as spectacle, a story about ambition, addiction, and self-destruction wrapped in choreography that feels as intense as it is unsettling. From the opening moments, the film signals that it will not follow familiar rules. The performances are sharp, the editing is relentless, and the tone constantly shifts between energy and exhaustion. It mirrors the life of its central character, played with haunting precision by Roy Scheider, a man driven by creativity yet consumed by his own excess. This is not a hero's journey. It is a slow unraveling presented with brutal honesty. Audiences in the late 70s were not prepared for a musical that refused to celebrate itself. Instead of joy, All That Jazz offers introspection. Instead of escapism, it offers confrontation. The result was a divided response. Critics praised its boldness. They recognized the technical brilliance, the editing, the structure, the willingness to push boundaries. But mainstream audiences found it difficult to embrace. It was too raw, too personal, too willing to expose the darker side of artistic ambition. Financially, the film underperformed relative to expectations. It was not ignored, but it never achieved the widespread success that a musical with this level of talent might have been expected to reach. The disconnect between critical acclaim and audience response became clear. People admired the film, but they did not necessarily recommend it as entertainment. The Academy responded differently. All That Jazz won 4 Oscars, including Best Editing and Art Direction. These awards highlight the film's craftsmanship and its innovative approach to storytelling. It was a technical achievement as much as it was an emotional one. Today, the film is often regarded as one of the most daring musicals ever made, but at the time of its release, it stood as a reminder that honesty can be risky. When a film refuses to hide its flaws, it may also expose the limits of audience comfort, and that is exactly what happened here. All That Jazz did not fail because it lacked brilliance. It faltered because it revealed too much. Number 3. The Mission, 1986. Some films are built on spectacle, others are built on silence. The Mission belongs to the second category. Directed by Roland Joffé and featuring powerful performances from Robert De Niro and Jeremy Irons, this film is less concerned with action and more focused on moral conflict. It tells a story of faith, colonization, and resistance, unfolding at a pace that feels deliberate and reflective. Visually, the film is extraordinary. The landscapes are vast. The cinematography captures both beauty and isolation. Every frame feels carefully composed, reinforcing the emotional weight of the story. And then there is the music. Ennio Morricone's score does not simply accompany the film, it elevates it. It becomes the emotional backbone, guiding the audience through moments of tension and quiet devastation. Yet for all its artistic strength, The Mission struggled to find a wide audience. The pacing was slow, the themes were heavy, the narrative required patience and attention. In an era where audiences increasingly lean toward faster, more accessible storytelling, this film felt demanding. It did not offer easy answers or immediate rewards, and that made it difficult to market as mainstream entertainment. At the box office, the film underperformed. Its budget required stronger returns than it ultimately delivered. For studios, this was a clear disappointment. A film with this level of talent and production value was expected to reach a broader audience. Instead, it remained confined to critical circles and limited appreciation. The Academy, however, recognized its visual achievement. The film won the Oscar for Best Cinematography, a testament to its striking imagery and artistic ambition. That recognition confirms what many viewers later came to understand. The Mission is not a film that reveals itself quickly. It requires time. It asks for reflection. Over the years, its reputation has grown. It is now often seen as a powerful and deeply moving work. But at the time of its release, It stood as a clear example of how artistic depth can limit commercial appeal, not because audiences rejected it completely, but because they were not ready to engage with it on its terms. And when that happens, even a film of great beauty can struggle to find its place. Number 2. The Right Stuff, 1983. There are films that arrive quietly and grow over time, and then there are films that arrive with significance already attached to them. The Right Stuff belonged to the second category. It was not just a movie. It was a statement about heroism, about national identity, about the men who stepped into machines and risked everything to push beyond the limits of the known world. Directed by Philip Kaufman, Anna, the film set out to capture the early days of the American space program with a level of realism and reverence rarely seen in mainstream cinema. From a technical standpoint, the film is remarkable. The flight sequences feel grounded. The performances are restrained yet powerful. The storytelling balances spectacle with introspection. It does not rush. It allows moments to breathe. It invites the audience to understand the mindset of the astronauts rather than simply admire their achievements. And that is where the challenge begins. Because while critics recognized the depth and craftsmanship of the film, general audiences struggled with its pacing. It was long, it was deliberate. It focused as much on character as it did on action. For viewers expecting a fast-moving adventure, the experience felt demanding. The emotional payoff required patience, and not every audience was willing to invest that time. At the box office, the film underperformed. Its budget required strong returns, but the numbers fell short. For a film of this scale and ambition, that gap was significant. It became a commercial disappointment despite its critical success, and that contradiction defined its early legacy. The Academy responded with clear admiration. The Right Stuff won 4 Oscars, including Best Editing and Best Sound. These awards highlight the film's technical excellence and its ability to recreate a pivotal moment in history with precision and care. It was respected at the highest level of the industry. Over time, the film has gained recognition as one of the great historical dramas of its era, but its initial reception remains a reminder of a simple truth. Not every important story translates into immediate success. Sometimes a film is too patient for its moment, too focused on detail when audiences are seeking momentum, and when that happens, even excellence can struggle to find an audience. Number 1. Heaven's Gate, 1980. There are failures, and then there are collapses so large that they change the industry itself. Heaven's Gate is not just a film, it is a warning. Directed by Michael Cimino, who had previously delivered critical and commercial success, this project began with confidence and quickly descended into chaos. Budgets expanded, schedules slipped, creative decisions multiplied without restraint. What was supposed to be an epic became something far more dangerous. A production without limits. From the outside, the ambition was undeniable. The film aimed to capture a complex chapter of American history with scale and detail. The sets were massive. The attention to authenticity was extreme. Every frame was constructed with precision, but behind that precision was instability. As costs continued to rise, expectations grew heavier. And when expectations grow faster than control, collapse becomes inevitable. When the film finally reached theaters, the response was immediate and unforgiving. Critics were harsh, audiences were distant. The box office returns were catastrophic. With a budget that had ballooned far beyond its original scope, the film earned only a fraction of what was needed to recover its costs. It became one of the most infamous financial disasters in Hollywood history, not just because it failed, but because of how completely it failed. And yet, even within that collapse, there was recognition. The film won the Oscar for Best Cinematography, acknowledging the undeniable visual achievement behind the chaos. That award stands as a strange contrast, a symbol of excellence within a production defined by excess. The impact of Heaven's Gate extended far beyond its own release. It changed how studios approached risk. It reshaped the balance of creative control. It became a reference point whenever a project threatened to spiral out of control. The industry learned from its failure, and in that sense, the film achieved something few others have. It altered the system itself. Today, it is often revisited and reassessed. Some see beauty in its ambition. Others see only the consequences of unchecked vision. But one fact remains unchanged. Heaven's Gate represents the extreme edge of what happens when ambition loses balance. It is not just the final entry on this list. It is the ultimate example of a film that won an Oscar yet lost almost everything else. So what do these films prove? Success is not always immediate. Failure is not always final. Sometimes the audience walks away, but history walks back. And when it does, the story changes. Which of these surprised you the most? And which one deserved better? Let me know your thoughts below.